What does it take for a human being to abandon their only shelter and run barefoot into a blizzard where the temperature is 30 degrees below zero? What kind of terror is so profound, so absolute, that it makes a slow, freezing death in the wilderness seem like the better option? In February of 1959, in the remote Ural Mountains of the Soviet Union, 10 of the country's most experienced young hikers set out on a grueling expedition to a place the indigenous Mansi people call Kalat Syakhl, the Dead Mountain. Only one would return. When search parties finally reached their abandoned camp, they found a scene that defied all logic. A tent sliced open from the inside, 9 sets of footprints leading away into the deadly, frozen darkness, and then the bodies found scattered over a mile away, some only partially dressed, some with horrific internal injuries that a medical examiner compared to the force of a major car crash, yet with no external signs of trauma. This is the true story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. It is more than just a mystery. It is a chilling psychological puzzle box, a case so bizarre and so terrifying that over 60 years later investigators are still haunted by one simple unanswered question. What were they running from? Before we step into the heart of the nightmare, we must first understand the people who lived it. The Dyatlov group was not a team of amateur adventurers. They were, by every measure, the best of the best. They were all students or recent graduates of the Ural Polytechnical Institute, a prestigious university in the industrial heart of the Soviet Union. In the rigid conformist world of the USSR, they were part of the golden youth, young, intelligent, athletic, and fiercely patriotic. Their leader was 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov, an engineering student and an expert, grade 2 certified hiker. He was known for being a meticulous planner and a cautious, experienced leader. He had assembled a team of his peers, all of them seasoned veterans of the unforgiving Russian wilderness. There was Yuri Yudin, the only member who would survive, forced to turn back early due to illness. The others were a tight-knit group of friends, bound by a shared love for the raw, brutal beauty of the mountains. They were engineers, physicists, and students, their minds as sharp as their bodies were strong. They had faced blizzards, avalanches, and extreme cold before. They were not easily frightened. Their goal was ambitious, a Category 3 expedition, the highest and most difficult classification in the Soviet Union at the time. Their plan was to trek nearly 200 miles through the northern Ural Mountains, a vast and desolate wilderness, and to summit 2 of its peaks, including Mount Otorten, a name which in the local Mansi language ominously translates to "Don't go there." On January 23, 1959, they set out, their faces filled with the confident optimism of youth. We know this because they meticulously documented their journey. They carried several cameras and kept a collective diary, a journal filled with photographs, jokes, and daily entries that paint a picture of a happy, competent, and completely normal expedition. Visuals show some of the actual, haunting black and white photos taken by the hikers, smiling faces, snowy landscapes, moments of camaraderie, voiceover. The early entries in their diary are filled with a sense of adventure. They sing songs, tell stories, and write about the magical silence of the mountains. There is no hint of fear, no sign of internal conflict, no premonition of the horror that is to come. Their final photos show them working together, digging out a platform to pitch their tent on the snowy slopes of Kalat Syakhl, the Dead Mountain. The plan was for Dyatlov to send a telegram back to their university sports club by February 12 to signal the successful completion of their journey. When the 12th came and went with no message, there was initially no major concern. Delays were common in expeditions of this difficulty, but as the days turned into a week, and then more, a quiet unease began to grow. On February 20th, after the families of the hikers demanded action, the first search parties, composed of volunteer students and teachers, were sent out. What they were about to find on that desolate, windswept slope would not just be the bodies of 9 of their friends. They would uncover a scene so bizarre, so illogical, and so terrifying, that it would defy every known explanation and give birth to one of the most enduring and chilling mysteries of the 20th century. On February 26, 1959, the search party reached the area where the Dyatlov group had last been heard from. The snow was deep, the wind was biting, and an eerie silence hung in the air. It was a landscape of stark, unforgiving beauty, but now, it felt heavy with an unspoken dread. The first discovery was the tent. It was partially collapsed and buried under a layer of snow, but as the rescuers began to dig it out, they noticed something profoundly disturbing. The tent had been cut open, violently, from the inside. Long jagged slashes ran through the heavy canvas. It was as if the hikers had been trying to escape something inside their shelter. Everything that the experienced hikers would have needed for survival was still inside the tent. Their warm clothing, their boots, their food supplies, their ice axes. Why would they abandon their shelter and all their gear in the middle of a sub-zero blizzard? It made no logical sense. The mystery deepened when they examined the tracks in the snow leading away from the tent. There were 9 sets of footprints, clearly belonging to the missing hikers. But these were not the tracks of people dressed for a deadly blizzard. Some were the tracks of people wearing only socks, some in single shoes, and some were barefoot. Imagine the scene. 9 young, experienced hikers, in the dead of night, in a raging snowstorm, with temperatures plummeting far below freezing, had inexplicably sliced open their tent and fled into the darkness, many without adequate clothing or footwear. What could have possibly driven them to such a desperate and seemingly suicidal act? The footprints led downhill, away from the exposed ridge of Kolotsiakal, towards a lightly wooded valley. The tracks were clear for about 500 meters, and then, in places, they disappeared under drifts of snow, only to reappear again. Strangely, the tracks remained together for a distance before beginning to spread out, as if the group had become disoriented or were moving independently. The search party followed these chilling footprints, their sense of unease growing with every step. They were tracking not a planned descent, but a desperate flight. It was a silent testament to a terror so immense that it overrode every instinct for survival. The first bodies were found the next day, February 27th, about 1.5 miles from the tent, near the edge of the woods. They were the bodies of Yuri Doroshenko and Yuri Krivonishenko, 2 of the stronger members of the group. They were lying face down in the snow, dressed only in their underwear. Near them, the searchers found the remnants of a small fire and branches that had been broken off nearby pine trees, suggesting a desperate attempt to seek warmth. But the most disturbing detail was this. Some of the branches on the trees were broken as high as 15 feet off the ground. This implied that someone had climbed high into the trees, perhaps to get a better view, or perhaps to escape something on the ground. The discovery of these first 2 bodies only deepened the mystery. Why were they so far from the tent? Why were they so lightly dressed? And what had driven someone to climb so high into a tree in the middle of a freezing night? The dead mountain was beginning to yield its secrets, but each revelation was more baffling and more terrifying than the last. The discovery of Doroshenko and Krivonishenko sent a shockwave through the search party and the university back in Sverdlovsk. The initial hope of finding the hikers alive began to dwindle, replaced by a grim determination to uncover the truth behind their fate. The search continued, moving deeper into the sparse woodland. The snow was still deep, and the terrain was becoming increasingly difficult. It took several more days to locate the next 3 members of the Dyatlov group. On March 5th, nearly a week after the first discovery, the bodies of Igor Dyatlov, Zinada Kolmogorova, and Rustem Slobodin were found, lying in a line between the tent and the location of the first 2 bodies at distances of 300 to 600 meters from the tent. It appeared they had been attempting to return to the relative safety of their shelter. Dyatlov was found clutching a small branch, as if in a final act of defense. Kolmogorova was better dressed than the first 2, but still without proper winter gear. Rustem Slobodin had a small, unexplained fracture in his skull, but it was not deemed fatal. The positioning of these 3 bodies suggested a desperate and ultimately failed attempt to retreat from whatever had caused them to flee in the first place. The discovery of these 5 bodies presented a perplexing picture. A group fleeing in terror from their tent in the middle of a blizzard, seemingly without their vital supplies, then attempting to return, only to succumb to the elements one by one. It was illogical, and it offered no clear explanation for their panicked flight. The search for the remaining 4 members of the group, Ludmila Dubinina, Alexander Kolevatov, Semyon Zolotaryov, and Nikolai Thibobrynyo, proved far more challenging. It took over 2 months, until May 4th, for their bodies to be finally discovered. They were found in a ravine, about 75 meters deeper into the woods than the first 5. This ravine, a small depression carved out by a stream, was partially filled with snow and ice, and it was here, among the melting snow and ice, that the true horror of the Dyatlov Pass Incident began to reveal itself. The bodies of these final 4 hikers bore injuries far more disturbing and inexplicable than those found earlier. Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov were found without their eyes and tongues. Dubinina was also missing a significant portion of her lips. Alexander Kolevatov was missing his eyebrows. While decomposition and scavenging by animals could explain some of these superficial missing tissues, The complete removal of eyeballs and tongues, deep within the facial structure, was deeply unsettling and difficult to explain naturally. But the most shocking and baffling discoveries were the internal injuries suffered by 3 of these final 4 hikers. Thibaut Brignoles had a severe skull fracture. Dubinina had multiple rib fractures on both sides of her chest, and Zolotriev had crushed ribs as well. The force required to inflict such extensive damage was immense, comparable, as the initial medical examiner stated, to that of a major car crash. Yet crucially, there were no external wounds on the bodies to explain these catastrophic internal injuries. No bruises, no lacerations, no signs of a physical struggle. It was as if they had been subjected to an immense, crushing force, but without any direct contact. The discovery in the ravine transformed the Dyatlov Pass incident from a tragic hiking accident into something far more sinister and inexplicable. The sliced tent suggested a sudden, internal threat. The barefoot prints spoke of irrational terror, and now, these horrific, internal injuries, coupled with the missing soft tissues, pointed towards a cause far beyond the realm of a simple blizzard or avalanche. The dead mountain had revealed its deadly secrets, but the answers they provided were more terrifying and more baffling than anyone could have imagined. The discovery of the inexplicably injured bodies in the ravine triggered a full-scale investigation by the Soviet authorities. Initially, the most likely explanations considered were a freak accident, such as an avalanche, or an attack by the local Mansi people, despite a lack of any evidence of conflict. However, the evidence simply did not support these initial theories. The tent was pitched on an open slope, showing no signs of an avalanche. The hikers were all experienced and would have chosen their campsite carefully. Furthermore, the tracks leading away from the tent were inconsistent with an avalanche. The theory of an attack by the Mansi people also quickly fell apart. There were no signs of a struggle outside the tent, and the local indigenous population were known to be peaceful. Investigators found no footprints other than those of the hikers themselves. Additionally, the nature of the injuries, particularly the internal trauma without external wounds, did not align with typical weapon attacks. The medical examiner's report was deeply perplexing. While acknowledging the possibility of some superficial tissue loss due to scavenging, the extensive internal fractures were deemed to be caused by a powerful, blunt force. The lack of external injuries led to speculation about a sudden, immense pressure wave or impact. The official investigation, shrouded in the secrecy typical of the Soviet era, ultimately concluded that the deaths were caused by a compelling unknown force that the hikers were unable to resist. This vague and unsatisfactory conclusion only served to fuel further speculation and conspiracy theories that persist to this day. Several crucial questions remained unanswered. Why did the hikers cut their tent open from the inside and flee into a deadly blizzard without adequate clothing or gear? What immediate and terrifying threat could have been inside or right outside their tent? What caused the horrific internal injuries suffered by some of the hikers? Injuries comparable to a major car crash, yet with no external signs of trauma. What kind of force could inflict such damage without leaving a mark on the skin? What accounts for the missing eyes and tongues of some of the victims, while scavenging is a possibility? The targeted and complete removal of these specific soft tissues from deep within the facial structure remains highly unusual. Why were the footprints leading away from the tent so varied in terms of footwear? Did some have more time to put on some footwear than others? Or does it suggest a state of extreme panic and disorientation? The official investigation quickly closed the case, sealing the files and contributing to the mystery surrounding the Dyatlov Pass incident. In a society accustomed to official explanations, the admission of an unknown compelling force was deeply unsettling and left a vacuum that would be filled by countless theories, ranging from the plausible to the truly bizarre. With the official Soviet investigation providing no real answers, the mystery of Dyatlov Pass was left to fester. Over the decades, dozens of theories have been proposed, each attempting to piece together the impossible puzzle of that night. The most widely accepted, scientific explanation is the Slab avalanche theory, a modern re-examination of the original avalanche idea, but with a crucial, psychological twist. A slab avalanche is not the classic, thundering wave of snow you see in movies. It is a far more insidious event. It happens when a heavy, cohesive slab of snow rests on top of a weaker, underlying layer. If this slab cracks, it can suddenly and catastrophically drop, or settle, a few feet in an instant, creating a massive, thunderous crack and a powerful compression wave. Proponents of this theory, like authors Donnie Eicher and Ben Anderson, have meticulously reconstructed the events, They argue that the hikers, in order to shelter from the wind, had cut into the snow slope to pitch their tent, a standard but in this case, fateful, procedure. This act of cutting into the slope may have destabilized a large slab of snow directly above their tent. Now, let's enter the minds of the hikers. Imagine the 9 of them, huddled together in the dark confines of their tent after a long day of trekking. A fierce blizzard is raging outside. Suddenly, without any warning, there is a deafening, bone-jarring crack as the snow slab above them settles. The immense weight of the snow instantly collapses a portion of the tent, pinning some of the hikers underneath. This explains the horrific internal injuries, the crushed ribs and fractured skulls inflicted by a massive, blunt force, with no external wounds. The psychology of what happens next is the key to this theory. The hikers are in a state of absolute, primal terror. They are trapped in the dark, in a collapsed tent, buried under what they believe is the beginning of a massive avalanche. Some of their friends are severely injured, moaning in agony. They cannot see, they cannot hear anything but the storm, and they believe they are about to be buried alive. In this state of pure panic, rational thought evaporates. The main entrance of the tent is blocked by the collapsed snow. The only way out is to cut their way through the canvas. This explains why the tent was sliced open from the inside. Their first and only instinct was to escape. They don't grab their boots or their coats. They are not thinking about the cold. They are thinking only of escaping the immediate, crushing threat of the snow. Once outside, they are in a disorienting, terrifying world. The wind is howling, the temperature is 30 below, and they are in a state of shock, some of them barefoot, some with severe internal injuries. Their training would tell them that the safest place during an avalanche is on top of the snow, away from the initial fracture. So, they run downhill, towards the tree line, a place that seems to offer the only possible shelter. This explains the barefoot tracks leading away from the tent. This theory elegantly explains the cut tent and the internal injuries, but does it explain everything? Critics point to several inconsistencies. Why were there no signs of a major avalanche at the scene when the search parties arrived? Why did the hikers' tracks suggest they were walking in an orderly single-file line away from the tent, not fleeing in a chaotic panic? And most importantly, how does a slab avalanche explain the missing eyes and tongues? While this theory is the most scientifically plausible, it leaves behind a residue of doubt, a collection of strange and unsettling details that continue to haunt the case and lead investigators down even darker and more speculative paths. What if the force that drove the 9 hikers from their tent was not something they could see or touch, but something they could feel? What if the weapon that killed them was not a physical object, but a silent, invisible wave of energy? This is the foundation of the infrasound theory, a fascinating and deeply unsettling explanation that attempts to solve the puzzle of the hikers' irrational behavior and their strange, internal injuries. Infrasound is a low-frequency sound, below the normal limit of human hearing, typically under 20 Hz. While we cannot consciously hear it, our bodies can still be affected by its vibrations. It occurs naturally in the world, generated by events like volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, and, crucially, by certain types of intense wind conditions, like the kind that would have been present on the slopes of Kholat. The theory proposes that the specific topography of Dyatlov Pass, combined with the fierce blizzard conditions on that fateful night, created a rare and powerful natural phenomenon, a vortex of wind that generated intense infrasound. Now, let us place ourselves back inside the tent. The hikers are sheltered from the wind, but they are not sheltered from the sound. They are suddenly bombarded by these low-frequency vibrations. The psychological effects of infrasound on humans have been documented. It can induce a state of profound, unexplainable dread, intense anxiety, and primal fear. It can cause the sensation of a presence in the room, of being watched by an unseen entity. For the Dyatlov group, huddled in the dark, this would have felt like a direct, supernatural assault. Their hearts would have begun to pound, their breathing would have become shallow, and a wave of pure, baseless panic would have washed over them. This provides a powerful explanation for their seemingly insane flight. They were not running from a physical threat. They were running from a feeling so terrifying, so overwhelming, that it short-circuited all of their training and rational thought. Their only instinct was to escape the source of this invisible torment, the tent, as quickly as possible. This explains why they cut their way out and fled into the deadly cold without their gear. But the infrasound theory goes a step further. It also attempts to explain the horrific internal injuries at extremely high intensities. Infrasound is not just a psychological weapon, it can become a physical one. The vibrations can cause the air in the lungs and chest cavity to resonate, a phenomenon known as acoustic resonance. This could, theoretically, create a pressure wave inside the body powerful enough to fracture ribs and cause massive internal damage, all without leaving a single mark on the skin. The infrasound theory is elegant in its horror. It provides a single, natural phenomenon that could explain both the irrational panic and the bizarre, car crash-like injuries. It paints a picture of the hikers being driven mad and then physically broken by a silent, invisible force of nature. However, like the avalanche theory, it is not without its flaws. The level of infrasound required to cause such devastating physical injuries would have to be incredibly, almost unprecedentedly high. While the psychological effects are well documented, the physical effects remain largely theoretical. Furthermore, it doesn't offer a clean explanation for why only some of the hikers suffered these injuries, or why they were found in different locations, and it certainly doesn't explain the missing eyes and tongues. The Sound of Madness provides a compelling, almost science fiction-like explanation for the tragedy. But the mystery of Dyatlov Pass is a complex one, and some investigators believe the answer lies not in a freak of nature, but in a far more human and far more sinister source: the secrets of a paranoid Cold War-era superpower. The year was 1959. The world was locked in the icy grip of the Cold War. The Soviet Union and the United States were engaged in a frantic, clandestine arms race, developing and testing a terrifying new generation of secret weapons. In this atmosphere of paranoia and official secrecy, it is no surprise that many investigators believe the unknown compelling force that killed the Dyatlov hikers was not a freak of nature, but a phantom of the Soviet military machine. This is the secret weapon test theory. The Ural Mountains, where the incident occurred, were not just a pristine wilderness. They were the industrial and military heart of the Soviet Union. The region was home to numerous secret military installations and was a known testing ground for new technologies. The theory posits that the Dyatlov group, by pure, tragic bad luck, had strayed into or near a secret military test zone. What they saw that night was something they were never meant to see, and the force that drove them from their tent was man-made. What could this weapon have been? The theories are numerous and deeply unsettling. Some speculate it was a neurological weapon, a sonic or microwave device designed to induce panic and terror, which would align perfectly with the hikers' irrational flight. Others suggest a test of a new type of concussive bomb or a fuel-air explosive, which could create a powerful blast wave capable of inflicting the observed internal injuries, without leaving shrapnel or significant external marks. This theory gains chilling credibility from several strange pieces of evidence that were either officially documented or reported by search party members. For several weeks in February and March of 1959, around the time of the incident, residents in the surrounding areas reported seeing strange glowing orange spheres or orbs in the night sky, moving silently over the Ural Mountains. Was this a celestial phenomenon, or the visual signature of a secret rocket or missile test? Even more disturbingly, some members of the original search party later claimed that the skin of the dead hikers had a strange orange tan, and their hair had turned prematurely gray. At the funeral, relatives swore that the bodies, which should have been pale, looked deeply tanned. This has led to the most terrifying version of the military theory, that the hikers were accidentally exposed to a radioactive or chemical agent, perhaps from the fallout of a secret dirty bomb, or a rocket fuel test. This could explain the strange appearance of the bodies, and would have given the Soviet authorities a powerful motive for an immediate and total cover-up. If 9 of their own brightest students were accidentally killed by a secret weapons program, it would be a political and scientific disaster of the highest order. From a psychological perspective, the military theory is incredibly powerful because it provides a single, rational antagonist. It replaces the chaos of nature with the cold, deliberate malice of a secretive government. It suggests that the hikers were not just victims of a tragic accident, but were witnesses who had to be silenced. It fits perfectly into the Cold War narrative of paranoia, cover-ups, and the terrifying price of state secrets. However, like all the other theories, this one is riddled with holes. There was no significant radiation detected on the bodies or at the campsite by the official investigators. There is no declassified Soviet record of any such weapons test in that area at that time, and it still fails to explain some of the most intimate and bizarre details. Why was the tent cut from the inside? Why would a concussive blast not damage the surrounding trees? Why were the hikers barefoot? The military cover-up theory provides a compelling villain. but it struggles to explain the specific, strange behavior of the victims themselves. The Cold War phantoms offer a tantalizing solution to the puzzle, a narrative of conspiracy and hidden truth. But the mystery of Dyatlov Pass is a stubborn one, and it's possible that the answer lies not with an avalanche, not with infrasound, and not with a secret military weapon, but with a final, even more outlandish possibility. We have now walked the paths of reason. We have dissected the scientific possibility of an avalanche and the invisible terror of infrasound. We have explored the dark corridors of Cold War paranoia, searching for a secret military culprit. And yet, each of these rational explanations leaves us with a residue of doubt, a collection of bizarre details that refuse to fit neatly into any logical box: the crushed ribs with no external wounds, the missing tongues and eyes, the strange orange spheres in the sky. When reason fails to provide a satisfactory answer, the human mind, in its desperate search for meaning, will often turn to the realm of the extraordinary. And so, we must now enter the final, most speculative wing of our psychological autopsy, the world of high strangeness. These are the fringe theories, the explanations that are dismissed by mainstream science, but which persist with a powerful folkloric energy precisely because they dare to explain the details that other theories cannot. Our first and most primal theory comes from the ancient lore of the mountains themselves. The Ural Mountains, like all great wildernesses, have their legends. The local Mansi people have long spoken of a creature that haunts the snowy peaks large, a plike being known as the Menk or the Siberian snowman. This is the Russian equivalent of the Himalayan Yeti or the North American Bigfoot. Could the hikers have stumbled upon the territory of such a creature? This theory, while seemingly fantastic, attempts to provide a direct answer to two of the case's biggest mysteries: the sheer, overwhelming terror that would be required to make 9 experienced hikers slice open their tent and flee into a blizzard, could certainly be induced by a close encounter with a large, unknown, and aggressive creature. Furthermore, the immense, crushing force needed to inflict the car crash-like internal injuries is consistent with the brute strength of a large ape-like animal. One of the last photos on the hiker's camera roll, a blurry, chaotic image taken in the dark, is often cited by proponents of this theory as a possible terrifying glimpse of the creature in the final moments before the chaos. But, like all such legends, there is no definitive proof, no non-human footprints, no physical evidence that such a creature even exists. The Siberian snowman remains a tantalizing but ultimately unprovable phantom. This leads us to our second, and even more outlandish theory. What about the strange orange spheres seen in the sky? The Soviet military explanation points to rocket tests, but what if they were something else entirely? What if they were unidentified flying objects? The UFO theory proposes that the Dyatlov group were the unfortunate witnesses to an alien encounter. This narrative, while easily dismissed, attempts to tie all the loose ends together. An encounter with an unknown, otherworldly intelligence could certainly induce the level of terror needed to explain their panicked flight. Advanced non-human technology could explain the bizarre, internal injuries inflicted by an unknown force. It could even explain the reports of the strange orange tan and gray hair, perhaps the result of an unknown form of radiation from the craft's propulsion system. The UFO theory is the ultimate wild card. It can be used to explain anything and everything precisely because we know nothing about it. It is easy to dismiss these theories as fantasy, but their psychological importance cannot be overstated. They exist because the rational explanations have failed us. The human mind abhors a vacuum, especially a terrifying one. The Yeti and the UFO, for all their strangeness, offer a kind of comfort. They place the source of the horror firmly in the realm of the other, the non-human, the unknown. It is, perhaps, easier to believe that the hikers were killed by a mythical monster or visitors from another world, than to confront a more unsettling possibility, that the full spectrum of what can happen on our own planet, whether by freak acts of nature or the secret actions of men, is so terrifying that it can look and feel completely alien. These theories are the folklore of the Dyatlov Pass mystery. They are the stories we tell when the truth is either too complex, too well hidden, or simply too horrifying to accept. So where does this leave us? We are standing in the center of a labyrinth of terrifying possibilities, with multiple paths leading in different directions, yet none leading to a clear exit. The avalanche theory explains the injuries but struggles to explain the hikers' orderly retreat. The infrasound theory explains the panic, but struggles to explain the physical trauma. The military theory provides a powerful villain, but lacks any concrete evidence, and the paranormal theories, while tantalizing, require a leap of faith that takes us beyond the realm of forensic investigation. It is possible that the truth is not a single, elegant solution. It may be a messy, chaotic combination of these events, a terrifying tapestry woven from multiple threads of dread. Let us try, for a moment, to construct one final, plausible narrative, a sequence of events that combines the most likely scientific theories with the known psychological responses to extreme fear. Imagine the 9 hikers, huddled in their tent against the raging blizzard. Outside, the unique topography of the mountain and the fierce winds create a powerful and disorienting vortex of infrasound. They don't hear it, but they feel it. It's a low vibrating pressure that induces a state of sudden, unexplainable, and primal terror. It feels like a supernatural presence, an invisible weight pressing down on them. In this state of irrational panic, their only instinct is to escape the source of the feeling, the tent. This explains why they slice it open from the inside and flee into the deadly cold without their gear. As they stumble down the slope, disoriented and terrified, another natural event occurs. The very act of them running onto the snow slab below their camp destabilizes it, triggering a localized slab avalanche. It is not a massive, thundering wave, but a sudden, heavy drop. Several of the hikers who are lagging behind are caught in the crushing weight of the snow. This inflicts the horrific car crash-like internal injuries, the crushed ribs, the fractured skulls, without leaving significant external marks. Now, the remaining uninjured hikers are faced with a new, horrifying reality. They are a mile from their tent, in a blizzard, without proper clothing, and some of their friends are severely injured or already dead. The initial irrational panic caused by the infrasound is replaced by the cold, rational terror of their situation. Their training kicks in. They make a desperate attempt to survive. They carry their injured comrades deeper into the woods, seeking the shelter of a ravine. They try to start a fire. Someone, perhaps, climbs a tree to try and get a final, desperate look at the location of their tent, but it is too little, too late. One by one, in the face of the overwhelming, brutal cold, they succumb to hypothermia. The final, gruesome injuries, the missing eyes and tongues, are most likely the work of scavenger animals, the small creatures of the forest discovering the bodies long before the official search party arrived. This combined theory is, for many, the most complete and logical explanation. It requires no secret weapons, no mythical creatures. It requires only a perfect storm of rare natural phenomena and predictable human psychology. It is a story of tragic coincidence, a series of unfortunate events that led to a cascade of terror and death. And yet, even in this most rational of explanations, a sliver of doubt remains. It feels too neat, too coincidental. Is it possible for so many things to go so wrong in a single night? This lingering uncertainty is the true power of the Dyatlov Pass mystery. It forces us to accept that sometimes, the world does not provide us with a single, simple answer. Sometimes, the truth is a chaotic and terrifying combination of forces beyond our control. And sometimes, the most horrifying possibility of all is that we will simply never know. For over 60 years, the ghosts of the Dyatlov group have haunted the frozen slopes of Kolatsia. The official investigation was closed. The files were sealed, but the story refused to die. It was kept alive in the hushed whispers of local folklore, in the determined investigations of amateur researchers. And eventually, with the fall of the Soviet Union and the rise of the internet, it exploded into a global phenomenon. The Dyatlov Pass Incident has become one of the great, enduring modern myths, a story that has been dissected in countless books, documentaries, and online forums. But why? What is it about this specific tragedy that gives it such a powerful and lasting grip on our collective imagination? The answer is a deep and fundamental part of our own psychology. The story of Dyatlov Pass is a perfect anatomy of a very specific kind of dread, the terror of the unknown. Human beings are pattern-seeking creatures. Our brains are hardwired to find meaning, to create narratives, to connect cause and effect. We do this to make the chaotic, unpredictable world feel safe and understandable. The Dyatlov Pass Incident is a direct assault on this fundamental human need. It is a story comprised entirely of broken patterns and impossible contradictions. Experienced hikers don't cut their way out of a perfectly good tent. People don't flee into a blizzard without their shoes. Bodies do not suffer the internal trauma of a car crash without a single external bruise. Every piece of evidence in this case is a scream of illogicality. This is what makes it so much more terrifying than a simple crime story. A murder, for all its horror, has a logic. There is a killer, a victim, a motive. But here, There is no clear antagonist. Was the killer a freak of nature, a secret government, a paranormal entity, or just a cascade of impossible bad luck? Because we cannot definitively answer this question, the story remains a terrifying open wound in our understanding of the world. It forces us to confront the possibility that sometimes there is no neat explanation, no comforting narrative. Sometimes the world is simply chaotic, violent, and utterly terrifyingly random. The 9 hikers on that mountain have become more than just victims. They have become symbols of our own vulnerability in the face of the unknown. Their story is a modern campfire tale that serves a very ancient purpose. It is a cautionary story that reminds us that for all our science, for all our technology, for all our reason, we do not have control. It reminds us that there are still dark places on the map, both in the world and in the human experience, where our understanding ends and the true, primal dread of the unknown begins. The hikers went looking for the edge of the map, and they found it. Their legacy is the chilling, permanent question mark they left behind for the rest of us to ponder. Someone walking alone down a dark street, a scientist looking at a complex piece of data they can't understand. The music becomes softer, more intimate. The story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident is not just a historical event that happened long ago in a frozen, faraway land. It is a timeless parable, a mirror that reflects a fundamental part of our own modern lives. We may not be hiking in the Ural Mountains, but each of us, in our own way, will eventually face our own dead mountain. We face it in the moments of profound uncertainty in our own lives, the sudden, unexplained illness that doctors can't diagnose, the financial crisis that seems to appear from nowhere and shatter our sense of security. The global events that unfold on our screens, chaotic and terrifying, defying any simple explanation. These are the moments when, like the hikers, we are confronted with a force that is powerful, unknown, and utterly indifferent to our plans and our logic. The hikers' flight from their tent is a powerful metaphor for our own human response to overwhelming, incomprehensible fear. When faced with a threat we cannot understand, our first instinct is often to panic, to abandon our shelter of reason and run into the cold darkness of irrationality and fear. The real terror of Dyatlov Pass is not just what happened to the hikers, but the chilling recognition that under the right circumstances, we too could be capable of slicing our way out of our own tent. So, what is the ultimate lesson from this enduring, frozen nightmare? It is a lesson in humility. It is a reminder that we do not have all the answers. It is a call to respect the power of the unknown, and to have compassion for those who are lost in its fog. The 9 hikers on that mountain were not weak. They were strong, experienced, and intelligent. But they encountered a force that was stronger. Their story teaches us that the most important survival skill of all may be the ability to accept that some questions may never be answered. And so, we are left with the final, haunting images. The sliced tent, the barefoot prints in the snow, the silent, watching peaks of the Ural Mountains. The case remains open. The mystery remains unsolved. The dread remains real. Now, we turn the investigation over to you. After hearing all the evidence and all the theories, from the scientific to the strange, what do you believe happened on that frozen mountain in 1959? Leave your theory in the comments below. Let's continue the search for an answer together, because the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident reminds us that the most terrifying mysteries are not the ones we read about in books, but the ones that are waiting for us in the dark, silent places of the world.